Hello everybody, I am Ben from Team Panic. It is time to talk about how my newest robot performed at Robo Wars. This here is part of a multi-bot called Mistakes Were Made, and continuing on with the misspelling theme, my half got called Flop, and the other half, a very cool chainsaw robot built by Steve, who I've mentioned on this channel multiple times, and driven by his son Owen, also mentioned on this channel multiple times, got called Chinsaw. Together they made up a multi-bot, which meant that they had to be weighed together, which was kind of fun, but also weighed independently because the way the rules work, the thing is done on weight. So if you knock out 50% or 60% of the weight, I can't remember exactly what the number is, but you need to knock out a majority of the weight of the multi-bot to knock out the whole thing. And in this case, that meant knocking out Flop here, because this robot is about 8 kilos and Chinsaw is about 5.5, or a little bit under 5.5. So knocking out my flipper was the way to knock out the multi-bot. After weighing the robots in, we did do safeties, which was actually the first chance I got to drive this multi-bot around a little bit, because if you watch the build video, linked in the description and on the end card, I did not get to drive Flop here before the competition because one of my ESCs had died, and thankfully Steve managed to provide me with a replacement. So this was the first time the robot drove. Oh, I'm so drifty. Okay. I was pretty happy with that, to be honest. That it's very quick. It's way quicker than it needs to be. So I have a 1-to-1 gear ratio at the moment between my gearing and my actual wheels, and it's a belt drive system so that all of the weight of the robot is not on the output shaft of these motors, because the motors are only 6mm output shaft, and instead I have hardened steel M8s that I am running bearings on to run all of the wheels, because that is a much more sensible idea in a competition where there are flippers and you are only 8 kilos. So the flippers that are in this competition could very, very easily throw this entire robot straight into the ceiling and have it drop back down again, which would shatter the gearboxes if they were taking that load all on their own. So hence the belt drive system. And I'm thinking too, though, with how fast this robot drove in the arena just then, we could actually get away with some extra gearing stages between the actual gearboxes and the wheels, because that will give us a little bit more pushing power and a little bit more controllability. So moving on through into the fights, we had our first fight draw against a robot called Spyro. This was a brand new overhead saw style robot, so I instantly reconfigured Flop here. This is Flop's kind of main configuration, but I do also have an anti-saw configuration, which adds extra armor paneling up top, basically just on TPU blocks to kind of keep everything away. And the whole idea is that the saw can't get through everything. It can get through the top layer, but then whatever the mechanism is holding the saw in place gets stopped by the actual HDPE sheet that is up there. So let's see how well that worked. Countdown. 3, 2, 1, activate.
Alright, and the robots are spinning up.
Saw blades up to speed.
That chainsaw going around the side, trying to just back off that steel. Don't think a chainsaw is very effective on a steel panel there,
but those links are very chainsaw height. If any of those links are removed, the robot will stop working. So it's all about driving skill at this point. Oh, dropping the saw blade down, can you do it?
That lifter going into the back, trying to lift, but he doesn't get quite enough height to get under that saw. There's forks underneath.
When your robot's made out of plastic, a saw blade is a very scary opponent. I hear a lot of grinding, that little lifter bot coming in to save its buddy.
Oh, it looks like he may have taken out that chainsaw. Spyro going around, turning its attention to the lifter. That saw spinning back up, balancing on those front two wheels. Perfectly balanced to pin and lift the bottom. Need some extra weight has been added into that plastic arm on top here to try and stop Spyro.
Oh! The saw blade seems to be hitting itself and self-destructing.
So it's 3D printed parts
So it looks like the little chainsaw bot is immobilized, so half of the custom bot has died.
Now we'll count against that, against mistakes were made when this goes to the judges. Looks like Spyro's lost its saw though. Something's gone wrong in that mechanism there. Taking itself out. But still able to lift, so trying to get underneath mistakes were made. And Peter, we're getting the wall. Driving carefully.
Driver Spyro just imagining the saw blades working. How delicious the carnage would be. It's down to a driving competition now. Who can outdrive their opponent and outlast the remaining 1 minute of this fight? Looks like Robo's looking quite sluggish.
Mistakes were made, substitution ground unit issues. 1 minute to go. That saw will be a great weapon right now, that spinning down onto that juicy plastic.
Looks like the second half of mistakes were made, struggling to get that lifter around to face Spyro. Wheels spinning, leaving little skid marks on the arena floor.
This one's probably going to go to the judges. It's a tough decision moving forwards.
It's always tough to judge a fight that goes like this. We're judging based on damage, control, aggression, and in this case, because of a multi-bot, when you lose half a multi-bot, it does count quite strongly. Spyro doing a little acrobatics with our ults. Count this fight down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And this one will go through the judges.
Yikes, so that could have gone better. A couple of things went very badly wrong in this fight. First of all, unfortunately, Chinsaw had a intermittent electrical failure, which meant that once it got pushed into the corner and kind of dragged back out again, it just stopped because there was a wire in there somewhere that just had an issue and disconnected, which meant that power disconnected. And you could actually, if you go back and look at the footage, as it kind of stops there, the power light on the front of it is kind of blinking on and off. That's not what's supposed to be happening. It's supposed to be sitting there solid the whole time. So that kind of intermittent blinking meant that there was an intermittent power failure and the whole robot just refused to move or do anything because every half second or so, the whole robot was shutting down and then the ESCs needed to power back up and stuff. It was just a mess, unfortunately. The good thing, though, that did happen was the top armor worked. It got a cut in it, but other than that, the rest of the robot was totally fine. Well, the rest of the armor paneling and stuff on the robot was totally fine. The big issue here, of course, being the drivetrain on flop. Now, this is the time we actually talk about the drivetrain because I didn't really discuss it in length in the build video. It is ABS pulleys to go from the actual 6mm shaft out to the wheels. The wheels themselves have an inbuilt pulley in a kind of TPU print, which from experience has been very sturdy and usable. The only thing you can't do with TPU is you can't put anything in to connect to a D shaft because it just rounds out instantly. So on the wheel side, that was totally fine. On the ABS side, yeah, it also turns out that ABS rounds out too at the forces that you put on a robot in the 13 kilo class. And I had seen this before when I tried to print D-shaft prints for the 13 kilo class specifically. And this time I'd actually put a captive nut and a bolt down in, and I was hoping that the bolt tightened down against the actual D or the flat on the D shaft was going to be enough to stop it from stripping out. Unfortunately, that was not the case. We stripped out a number of these, including actually chamfering a bolt. So the shaft spun so much that it actually clipped the corner off of one of the bolts that I had in there, pushing down on the shaft, trying to keep it in position and transfer torque from the motors into the wheels. Yeah, this was just honestly kind of a bad idea. I probably should have or would have done something different if it wasn't for the fact that I built this robot in effectively 2 weeks because we knew about the competition for a little over a month. And for most of that, I was in a cast, and then I was away for Christmas, and then I was back for 2 weeks to build this robot. And 2 weeks is not a lot of time to build a featherweight. Which meant that I made compromises, and one of those compromises was ABS pulleys, and unfortunately, they did not work out. The other thing too is I only had 8 of them. So the robot uses 4 at any given time, and in this fight, we had entirely destroyed 1. So I had to completely reconfigure things, reset things out, and dump a bunch of hot glue into some of them to try and make them stick and stay for the next fight. The only other thing I think to talk about in this fight is Spyro. So Spyro is a really cool design because it's an overhead saw that is mounted at a fixed angle, and then it has forks that lift up and down to kind of drop the saw into you. So the saw itself is not articulated, it's the front forks that are articulated. And that actually seemed to work really, really well. The other thing too is that partway through that fight, he hit his own bolt inside his setup with his own saw blade because he's actually using apparently magnetic clutches to get the saw to spin up. So he's actually not putting bolts through the blade, he's connected to it with magnets, and if you hit it hard enough or if he pushes it into something hard enough, it can slip, and that is what happened. It slipped back, and it started chewing into his own bolt, which was actually part of his like pulley reduction system. But apparently that's fine. As long as the bolt is mostly intact, the whole system can still work. So that was interesting and kind of crazy, and that is where those sparks came from in that fight. So with 1 loss under our belt, because we did lose to Spyro, losing 1/2 and not really being able to drive very well by the time that the fight was over did mean that we lost that fight. We're not really in good stead, but our next fight up I was so excited for. Our next fight up is up against a robot called Martial Arts. Now, this is an enveloping robot. It's very similar to, for those of you who have been around the channel for a while, I built a robot called Disguise. I also built a robot called Mask. Now, for those of you who haven't been around the channel but are familiar with older battle bots, there's a robot called Megatento. These robots are all enveloping style robots. The idea is that they have a big sheath of some kind or a big like capture tray of some kind that they drop over the opposing robot and then try and control the fight from there. Martial arts is interesting. Obviously, some things that happened before the fight there. We had gone back to the regular configuration for flop because, of course, there was no issue with martial arts attempting to cut into us or anything. Also, quick side note, just because it's hilarious to me, martial arts, the enveloping arse on top of that is 7 kilos. That is 7 kilos of like foam matting, the type of stuff that like jigsaws together and people make like armor and stuff out of for cosplays, and a little bit of steel, like apparently a hoop of steel around the bottom and a few ribs of steel to kind of keep the shape of the butt as it, you know, flops around and jams down on top of people. I was running the kind of backup pulleys that I had, or most of them, or we'd swapped over one and we were kind of using 3 that had been in the previous fight. And that was to our detriment because, of course, the fight ended this one with me stopping driving because I had basically just lost all of the first stage pulleys between the gearboxes and the output drive, which is a problem. And especially as, again, my half of the robot is more than half the weight, means that as soon as I stop driving, we lose. But lots and lots of hilarity in this fight. I love martial arts. It is such a hilarious robot. And of course, there was the bit where Chainsaw got stuck in martial arts because martial arts is running a winch to power the actual enveloping mechanism. And yeah, the gap for the winch is just wide enough to fit a chainsaw that doesn't have a chain on it anymore. And so they got stuck, or Chainsaw got stuck, and I had to throw in that quick shot of the release happening because it took a while. He was in there deep, and yes, I had a shot on the GoPro of 2 asses in frame all at once, and that was just a perfect kind of image for this particular fight. I thought that was hilarious. I wish I could have done better and more in this fight. The lifting weapon wasn't really a good fit for martial arts. There wasn't a lot I could do. The small amount of movement that I have on the actual flipper means that unless somebody is like fairly close to the ground, I don't even really touch them before the flipper is out of degrees that it can move. So that is a thing we'll be working on for next time. Yes, I read a lot of comments on the last video. Yes, there is a version 2 of this planned. Yes, it is a massive change. So don't really worry about commenting fixes for this particular shape and design because the new version is going to be wildly different to this. Still a flipper, still a YOLO style flipper, but yeah, all the geometry is going to change dramatically because, yeah, as this fight very well proved, this geometry doesn't do a whole lot. The other thing that happened in this fight is that the arse was not only an enveloping weapon, it was a distraction weapon. It was, because it's so big, it was very, very hard to see where my robot was half the time. I was attempting to like drive around the back of him. He had a stabilizing piece of aluminium that I was trying to like get into and lift because that thing was touching the ground and I knew it was and I knew I could lift that if I got to it. But it was at the back of the robot, which meant that I was driving around and then my vision of my own robot was obscured by a giant ass. So I couldn't do anything with the with my strategy because I just couldn't see what I was trying to do, which is kind of hilarious, and I think an unintended consequence of having such a massive robot in the arena. Oh, that was funny. I just wish that the drive system had stayed alive and stayed working because that would have been so good. But unfortunately, no. And that is the end of day 1. So this was a 2-day competition. We were guaranteed at least 4 fights if we could have the robots working long enough. And I'm starting to run out of spares for my drive system. I think I had 3 at this point, and in this fight I had completely totaled all 4 of them, to the point that one of them was completely worn away because the belt had slipped off and then just chewed through the ABS pulley, destroying it entirely. Like, that is the most destroyed pulley out of the entire set from the weekend. Thankfully though, I was pit table next to a very nice man named Sam, who was a local and had a CNC machine at home, and very, very kindly offered to whip me up some HDPE versions of those pulleys overnight between day 1 and day 2, which I 100% took him up on. So morning of day 2, he very, very kindly handed over 4 brand new HDPE pulleys to me, which worked amazingly well, or at least fit the belts really, really well, especially as he didn't quite have the right CNC bit, but he just sent it with the one that he had, and it seemed to work pretty well. I then drilled and tapped them to take M3 bolts to then try and capture the shaft, and was a little worried about the drive system, so didn't want to test it in case it did actually fail again, and so went straight into the next fight against a robot called Learning Curve. This is a robot that is a drum on the front and a static hammer on the back.
3, 2, 1, activate.
Huge box rush by Learning Curve, but both bolts moved out of the way, and that chainsaw is gone.
That blade's just falling off there and mounting sideways.
The Learning Curve's drum is spinning.
But that chainsaw trying to prod into its opponent.
He's going to make first contact with their weapon. But Learning Curve's unable to turn around and face the fight.
Learning Curve trying to use that axe to take off the saw of the snakes were made. The wheel of the saw the snakes were made.
Snakes were made surrounding Learning Curve, but as yet unable to get that drum into the other robot. And pops the wheel up of the smaller robot the snakes were made.
Really trying to hit the wheels and take them off.
Looks like the snakes were made maybe stuck. Learning Curve stuck on the lifter of the snakes were made around to the wheels and separate. Spyro, the robot separate.
That drum back up with that axe free from the snakes were made. The snakes were made lifter looking a little bit sluggish there. The snakes were made, are you able to move your lifter? You'll be able to show controlled translation towards your opponent. You have to start the count, and mistakes were made in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and the win goes to Learning Curve.
Hand drive issues again. So now this time the HDPE was really, really good. The only problem is that HDPE you cannot stick things to. So I hadn't put Loctite on any of the bolts or any super glue or anything or any hot glue or anything, because I know that you cannot stick things to HDPE. So I had just threaded the bolts in and hoped, and unfortunately they all backed out. Like just all of them backed out. I did not have a single one that had not backed out, and I had 8 bolts in because I had one from each side of the shaft to kind of pincer it and try and make sure that it was going to be okay. And yeah, unfortunately, all of them backed out. I knew that the drive was going to be an issue, and not wanting Owen to have short fights because of my issues, I was trying to drive around and avoid getting into pushing matches and avoid like overworking the drivetrain, but unfortunately, yeah, it didn't matter because I had driver issues fairly instantly, so I just did everything I could to not overtax the drivetrain, but also still show controlled movement, which meant a lot of backing and forthing. Trying to turn when you have a busted drive system is always an issue because wheels skidding and things puts more extra forces on all the drive mechanism and components and stuff, so you kind of just have to do what you can, which is a little bit of like backing and forthing. We didn't have a great time in this fight because unfortunately Chinsaw lost the chainsaw blade again. It turns out that running the saw horizontally like that is just unfortunately kind of bad for keeping the chain on, because as soon as something loosens up, it immediately drops the saw off, whereas if it was sideways or vertical, then if the chainsaw loosened up a little bit, it would take a force across to actually pop the chain off, because otherwise kind of gravity keeps it roughly in place, even if it goes a little bit loose. So, you know, learning curves on these things. Hey, we were fighting learning curve. That was kind of unintentional there. Yeah, the other thing that happened in this fight is obviously I started to go a bit slow, and we thought I was high-sided on something, so Owen came over and tried to shove me, and instead ended up sitting on top of me, which definitely did not help. More weight over the wheels was just a bad idea in general. And basically, like I said, the bolts had backed out by this point. So, you know, we lost that particular fight. And that was 3 fights down out of the competition. I had 3 spare ABS pulleys, and I had these HDPE pulleys, and I didn't know what I was going to do, because I didn't really feel like anything was going to work at this point in time. I kind of felt like we were a little bit doomed, to be honest, and that whatever we did for the final fight was not going to work. Then my table mate Sam came to the rescue again and mentioned a thing called Scotch keys, I believe, if I'm remembering the name of this right, which is where you jam something down the D shaft, basically to hold the pulley in place. And in this case, all I did was wood screws. I put wood screws on every flat, so all 4 of them had a wood screw in it. They were quite tight jamming in there, and they felt quite good turning the wheels by hand. So I actually tested it this time and managed to skate around the arena quite well. Unfortunately, I didn't film this particular bit. I didn't know how it was going to go, so I just didn't put the camera in, which is unfortunate. But I got a good speed. I was drifting around the arena. I was feeling pretty happy. So it's time to talk then about the final fight of the event. This was the last shot for this robot to do anything at all. And we were in a 4-way fight. Well, actually, technically a 5-way fight, because we're a multi-bot. But our opponents were Banana Bender, a lifter and shuffler that weighs something in the order of 20+ kilos. We had Zengaro, who was actually built by Steve as well, as with the other half of my multi-bot pair. It is also a lifter. And then finally we had I Need a Bigger Hammer, which is a hammer bot built by Jamie, somebody else from Adelaide. So it was basically Banana Bender versus 4 Adelaide robots. Although we didn't really team up as the Adelaide crew, we just kind of went a bit wild because, hey, it's effectively a rumble. Hey, the drive mostly worked that fight. I mean, I came out the other side with 2 and a bit wheels working. The Scotch key system worked pretty well. I did have a couple of the bolts back themselves out, or back out a little bit, which meant that the system wasn't perfect. But it has given me an idea for how to maybe print these pulleys and have them work. So if you want to see an interesting take on this idea, maybe subscribe, because I will do a video on that in the near future where maybe we'll be able to print, like ABS or PLA print, some new pulleys for Flop here and actually have them work. Fingers crossed. I think I can do it. But even if we can't, I can do some aluminium pulleys or something in the future to get this system to work better. So again, we will do a drive system update for Flop in the near future, because again, I'm pretty sure I can get the system to work. But going back to the fight, we did actually get a couple of little pops and get some, like, people kind of popped up into the air a little bit. Mostly I need a bigger hammer, because when the hammer was back, the weight was all at the back and we could throw the forks in underneath and go whoop and get a little kick out of the lifter. Which was nice. It was good to see the lifter doing anything at all. I mean, I did try it on Banana Bender and that just did not work in the slightest, but of course it wasn't going to. Banana Bender is a massive robot and also very, very, very loud. I have turned down the volume on that fight footage because otherwise all you can get when you're listening to that fight is which is just, yeah, it's very, very loud. I mean, it's loud outside the arena. It's exceedingly loud inside the arena. I was also very fortunate not to get flipped over. There was a couple of times Zangaro and Banana Bender had a go at me, and I cannot self-right because the lifter is sprung and the spring has to be kind of weak to not have energy sucked out of the flip. It means that if I get upside down, I probably don't even think I would have been able to drive, to be perfectly honest. Which would have been an issue, but thankfully we avoided that, so it wasn't actually an issue in this particular fight. Also, I managed to take a couple of hammer shots to the top, and I think, yeah, just the HDPE and everything just worked and held up and managed to survive multiple really solid hammer blows, so I'm not unhappy about that, especially as this robot is like 5 kilos lighter than everything else in there. Well, other than, of course, our multi-bot teammate. Yeah, it was an interesting fight, that one, and it was good fun. I also did, of course, at the very, very end, Zangaro lost a wheel, and I ended up being bullied on top of it and jammed into the corner on top of Zangaro's wheel. But thankfully, that became a big bot pile-up in that back corner for a second, and by the time all of that got released and backed off, we were left up on the tire, but there was less than 10 seconds to go, so I didn't get counted out, thankfully. Which means that we did lose this fight. I cannot remember who won it. I think maybe Banana Bender or I Need a Bigger Hammer. One of the two of them won it. But we lost by judge's decision, which I was happy about. I was happy the fact that I managed to keep the drive system mostly working for this fight. And again, I have ideas on how to get this drive system going better and working better and doing better in the future. So if you're interested in that, yeah, make sure you subscribe, because again, it will come out, but it's going to probably take a little while. Probably be like end of Feb at the very earliest before we start work on anything like that. Anyway, that is going to be it for this video. That is our 4 fights. We didn't do particularly well, but I think for a rush build, that is not a huge deal. I'm pretty happy on the whole. The bones of this idea, the concept seems to work. There is something here that we can build on. And you know what? For a first attempt and a rush build, I'll take that. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this one, and I will see you in the next video.